It's the fears of discrimination and the fear that menopause will almost define them rather than just be accepted as a part of life. How do we create an environment where you can work really at the peak of your performance and really productively? And how can you create a culture that empowers women to just be themselves in that space? You talking up about it will encourage others that is a safe space to enter into. And actually, if we have male allies along the way with us, talking about it, accepting they can't fix it, and being really open-minded to the resources that they can apply here to boost retention, performance and productivity, it's got to be worth a go to stop women leaving the workplace at the rate they are. If you employ one woman, you should really have a menopause policy.
Anna, it's great to have you. Thanks so much for agreeing to be interviewed on the Blue Light Leavers podcast. It's really good of you. I appreciate you making the time to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And we connected on LinkedIn. I have a really interesting post and thread, actually, but it would be really helpful if you could tell us a bit about you and your career history and what it is that you're now doing.
Yeah, so I'm actually a former journalist and TV producer. I was a sports journalist at Sky Sports and predominantly in Sky Sports News for 17 years. So I was quite institutionalized when I left, roughly about this time last year, actually. I had a lot of different sort of senior roles within Sky. I was, just before I left, I was the head of internal comms. I sort of led the charge around women's sport for them in terms of transforming women's sport broadcasting back in 2012. Back when it was seriously uncool to champion women's football and women's cricket and golf and things, and now we see where it's gone. So I had a fab career at Sky and had really enjoyable moments. The highlight probably being that transformation of women's sport. But within my career, I sort of went away, had a couple of babies, and it was my second maternity leave in 2019 where I just didn't feel right. And most women listening to this will know that, often, it didn't feel right because I had a pregnancy and a young baby to compare it to. And I was transitioning with a 10-month-old back into Sky, into a busy newsroom, live TV. It's pretty high pressure and you've got to be slightly mad to do it. And was just a complete shell of myself. And I didn't really know what was going on. I was very anxious. I struggled with eye contact. I couldn't sit around management meetings and sort of feel that I was remembering or recalling any information. I couldn't sit in a live TV gallery and remember names of people to put on sort of graphic lines that pop up on your TV screens. And I came home one night and said to my husband, look, I think I've got some sort of early onset. We need to go and see some sort of brain expert. And it was someone actually in the sports news newsroom that said, hang on a second, have you heard of perimenopause? The way you're feeling, the way you're behaving. And I'm always slightly embarrassed to admit I didn't know what it was. But I think it's really important to be open about that because none of us were taught about our hormones, at school. None of us learnt about estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, so actually the phrase perimenopause was just quite alien to me. But that sort of sent me off on a journey of discovery, actually. And I had something like 12 appointments across 10 months with a GP who just refused to diagnose me, tried to just palm me off with antidepressants, which I knew weren't right for me. And thankfully, because of my journalism background, I was able to sort of really investigate this subject. So I read a lot of books, I interviewed a lot of people, and I was absolutely convinced that it was that. And I had this sort of massive list of symptoms, and transpired that I was unfortunately one of 25% of women that suffer from severe or debilitating symptoms, which I'm sure we can get onto.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
But I effectively lost a year of my life, and I just couldn't carry on in my career like that. It wasn't fair on me, it wasn't fair on my colleagues. I just couldn't, get any joy from my job anymore because the symptoms were just sort of slowly destroying things, and taking a lot of the fun out of the role. And so through my investigation, I guess, about the state of play with this, I realised I wasn't alone, even though you feel incredibly isolated and lonely and think you're just going mad on your own during all this. When I started talking to more people, I realised I wasn't alone, and actually there were a lot of people that needed help. And up to 1 million women have left their jobs or have changed their careers because of the impact of perimenopause and menopause. And so I took some time to really reflect on what I could do, and felt really quite passionate to do something positive in this space. So I retrained, I went back to school, went back to the books, and retrained to be a certified exec coach, and now specialise in supporting women maintain their careers during perimenopause and menopause, because, you know, who actually wants to leave a job that they love and that they're in and that they're really thriving in? And it's the symptoms that are really trying to pull them away from that. So I set up my business last year, Allerton Coaching, and haven't looked back. Frankly, it's been quite a journey for me, but also I'm having impact on women's lives, which was always the main objective.
Yeah, I saw, and it's great to see, and you know, it is something, as I said to you before we actually hit the record button, it's something that's personal to us as well, and which is and from a coaching perspective as well, you know, a lot of people who I've been helping are peri and menopausal women, because and in particular the confidence and self-esteem, you know, sort of goes through the floor. And it's so I thought this would be a fascinating topic, and you know, obviously wanted to speak to an expert, and obviously with your lived experience as well. So it's brilliant to dive a little bit deeper into it. So from a signs and symptoms perspective, Anna, you've obviously given us a few that you went through, but are there any, you know, how does it sort of manifest itself, and how do people start to recognize that, you know, is there an age? You know, I've heard of women very young actually starting to go through, you know, through menopause. So if you just go into a bit more detail for us, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, sure. So perimenopause is basically the time before your periods stop. So a lot of women will continue to have periods. They may be slightly different, and they may be incredibly heavy, but you will still have a period, but you can start experiencing the side effects of fluctuating hormones during perimenopause. And then menopause is really the point at which your periods have stopped consecutively for 12 months. So that's kind of the difference, which is helpful.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it's really important also in this to sort of try and eliminate any fear. You know, I'm going to talk about some symptoms, but a lot of women will sail through this time of life. They might have a few bumps in the road, but they might actually have tools to navigate that effectively. Others might struggle with a few more, and then others may be in that 25% that might really sort of suffer from quite severe symptoms. So I think rather than just talking about symptoms from my experience, I think it's useful just to lean into some of the data here, just to keep it, you know, as a sort of nationwide perspective. There's an organisation called the Fawcett Society that did some research back in 22, which is kind of the most up-to-date research, and I suspect that there'll be more research coming out in this space as it grows in importance. But look, we know that some of the symptoms that I think the top symptom is 84% of women report a lack of sleep. So insomnia, you know, if you talk to a perimenopausal or a menopausal woman, it will probably not be that surprising if they say, oh yeah, I was up Googling holidays or something at 3 a.m, because you know, what happens to our metabolism and you know, it's just one of the really big symptoms that sort of wakes us up at 3, and then we really struggle to go back to sleep. And then typically, if it's anything like me, you go back to sleep and then you maybe get an hour in before the kids wake up. So I think that's, you know, that's something that really deeply impacts people's ability to function, let alone to work, and particularly blue lights. There's a lot of, you know, anxiety that comes out of that because of the impact of lack of sleep on long hours, on shifts when you're on blue lights, and an array of things. So lack of sleep is 84% of women report that. Brain fog, 73% of women report brain fog. And for anyone who doesn't know what brain fog is, I know this term came out of COVID a little bit, and actually it's a little bit more familiar with a lot of people, but you know, you just basically forget things. That I used to forget. I would, you know, if your name, you know, for example, isn't here on the Zoom, I'd be like, oh my goodness, what's his name? And then you think, well, I can't say Andy because I might be wrong. And your brain just starts to play tricks on you. Where are my phone? Where are my keys? You know, the remote has ended up in our fridge a couple of times, you know, don't even ask me why. And recalling people that you've worked with for a long time, thinking, I have absolutely no idea what this person's name is. You sit on Teams meetings at work and you've got actions to do, and you suddenly are full of fear and anxiety, thinking, what if the recordings fail, because I need to play that back and I need to check my notes, you know, that intensity of I'm going to forget things. You know, all of my corporate clients, their note taking just increases massively during this time because they become so forgetful. So brain fog is 73%. And then the third one is 69% report anxiety, and linked into that is a drop in confidence. And anxiety is probably the standout symptom that I suffered from big time before I was sort of diagnosed and treated. And so, you know, to talk about other symptoms, there's things like we've talked about when you know, looking at the two areas. If you're still having a period, you know, your cycle may change, it may become shorter. Many women experience flooding, which, you know, for anyone working in a blue light environment is incredibly tough and fuels a lot of anxiety and fear amongst women, because especially if you're not able to track what's going on with you. Hot flushes, lots of people have heard that. I sort of try and hold that down the list because we want to sort of banish the stigma and stereotype about this being about women in their 50s getting hot and angry. Far from it. Hot flushes, also cold flushes, and that's something that I experience, sort of feeling quite chilly when really you should be at sort of a decent room temperature. And night sweats. Night sweats obviously feed into a lot of the disturbed sleep and insomnia also. Mood swings, so loss of joy, 1 minute you're up, next minute you're down, struggling to find something consistent that gives you joy and happiness. Headaches, migraines, dizziness are reported. And difficulty concentrating, which is no surprise if you've been up all night and struggling with the exhausting effect that anxiety can have on you. Pain, you know, joint pain, bloating, things like that, urinary problems. So that's just sort of a handful. There are many, many symptoms, and more are being talked about, being reported and being learned about by experts in the medical space. But it's important to keep checking into that fact that you're not going to get all of those things. You know, some women may not suffer any of it, and some may just have a few. And to answer your question about average ages, this is kind of a little bit of a niggle for me, because I really feel that this labelling average ages really it prevented me from getting access to medical treatment for a year.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I was 38 when I started experiencing it. I think the average age is between sort of 40 and 41 for perimenopause. And then, you know, then you start looking at menopause and it's saying within 50s and things. But I think I'm a bit of a campaigner to strip away average age, because the conversation goes towards women in their 50s, excuse me, who perhaps have older children, who perhaps have children who have gone to university or have left into their own careers. And within all of this discussion, I'm really passionate that we keep women in their 30s within this conversation. And I think assigning average ages is isolating certain women, particularly who are scratching their heads thinking, oh, I've got a handful of these symptoms. Is it this? Typically, they're going to their GP and they're not necessarily getting the right support. I mean, look, this is not about GP bashing, absolutely not. There's plenty of GPs out there that are hot on this and that can jump on it quickly. But we need to be educating ourselves, male and female, around the fact that, okay, this can happen, but also let's keep an open mind that it can happen in far sort of ranging demographics than the average ages. Yeah.
And the reason I mentioned that was exactly that. It actually happened to one of my friends' wives very early on, and actually, you know, my wife has had similar conversations with our GP as well. Like I say, it's not a case of bashing, but there is that age thing around it. They can actually make finding help and support and getting the help you need really quite difficult. Obviously, you had the very similar thing yourself. So
and there's a difference also between early menopause, which is we've seen some really great journalism recently in documentary making by people really using their voice to talk about these subjects, and very young women, some teenage women, even have reported or spoken publicly about going through menopause. So yes, that's a very exception to the rule, but it's about understanding the much broader narrative around this. I think it will serve us all better if we keep an open mind around ages and symptoms.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you. So from an employment perspective, then, I mean, you've got some amazing stats, on your website, but from as a as an employer and actually, working for certain organizations, what are you seeing in terms of the impact of perimenopause?
Yeah, so there's a really great MP, actually, a Labour MP, Carolyn Harris, who is she's such a great voice about this, and she was actually on Sky News at the weekend on Sophie Ridge, and she was saying this set of data, which is just, we've got over 13 million women in menopause at the moment, but only 14% are being diagnosed or being treated. And if you think women over the age of 50 are the fastest growing demographic of the workforce, we've got quite a big problem here. And I would argue it's a workplace crisis. That, I've said already that we've lost 1 million women who have changed or quit their careers. That's 1 in 10 will quit. 1 in 4 will reduce their hours. It's also about stereotype and stigma attached to this. There's huge embarrassment attached to talking about this in the workplace. I think, in the Fawcett Society report, up to 44% of women said that they were just too embarrassed to talk about this. They weren't confident that it was going to be received in a really professional way. It's the fears of discrimination and the fear that menopause will almost define them rather than just be accepted as a part of life. But we're also hearing that up to 60% of workplaces offer no support. So whether this is a menopause policy through to a commitment, through to training, through to coaching, that's a huge number of employers that are not doing enough to support women in menopause when their workplace is going to be, when you look at this data around, depending on the area of profession that you're in, women over 50 are the largest growing portion, but only 14% of those going through menopause are being heard, essentially. So we've got quite a big problem here. I think it's about, and I'm sure we're going to get onto it, but it's about how do we retain talent? How do we create an environment where you can work really at the peak of your performance and really productively? And how can you create a culture that empowers women to just be themselves in that space? And it is possible. We can absolutely get into that. And I know we're going to talk about male allyship as well, which is a really essential part to this.
Yeah. If we could talk about the employer perspective, that'd be really helpful in what an employer can do. And then if we could then move on to maybe preparing for that conversation with your line manager or with your organization, that'd be fantastic. Yeah,
so I think anyone listening to this, if you think I don't know enough about this, then that's the trigger to actually say, if I don't, many of my colleagues won't. So let's do something about it. Let's reach out to someone like Anna. I run workshops, introduction to perimenopause and menopause in the workplace, where I share some of this data and share some of my own experience and try and bring it to life in how it impacted my career. But it's about education, it's that education thing that, if we don't know something, we typically as human beings start to fear something we don't know enough about. And there's a lot of fear associated with this. A lot of men don't think that they're welcome into the conversation. They absolutely are. I won't do my introduction to perimenopause and menopause to an all-female audience. I don't think it's productive as a team to move forward together on that path. Workplaces need to be looking at, and my view is shared by many other people in this space, if you employ one woman, you should really have a menopause policy. And really what that does is it's a stake in the ground to say, this is our commitment to you during this. This is what we're prepared to do. And, then it comes down to that one-on-one relationship with your line manager, because we know that perimenopause and menopause is not a one-size-fits-all. I would be so confident to sit in a room with 50 women and learn 50 different scenarios or experiences that they've all gone through. So it's really important for managers to sort of embrace the fact that they can't fix it. That's the one thing particularly male managers work with me on, is that it sort of stokes real discomfort for them that they can't come up with something, read a textbook, create a policy and do something to actually fix it for that colleague. And that comes from a place of kindness, the willingness to sort of make something better for someone else. But it's all about listening. And that you're a coach, you know what this is like. It's about listening on that much higher level and not listening to answer, but just allowing that person's space to be heard. And through education and doing workshops and training, it's about sort of acknowledging that women are having a really tough time being heard by the medical professional, or by potentially in their own relationship, you know, and actually to create a space where you can listen to someone and allow them that space to just vent or to ask for something that they might need right now. So what can employers do who are line managers to women? You know, it's a case of, don't overpromise, make sure that you say that you'll do something that you can deliver, but also, you know, what special measures can you put in place? You know, one of my coaching models is around really encouraging women to log their symptoms. And, you know, I work for Genis, which is a cycle mapping app that's founded by Jessica Ennis-Hill, the Olympian. And, you know, that the power of cycle mapping and logging your symptoms by way of a diary on an app like Genis is really powerful, because it feeds you back data, and it's data that you can start to work with. So it's about adopting a work smarter mindset, and that we can go into this and need it for a whole new podcast, but that's sort of just a sort of overview of, you know, but how are managers responding to that data? If you've got a female in your workforce who's been really proactive, who has, you know, taken the time and been meticulous about logging data, not only does it help her with her GP and her medical treatment, but it also provides her with information that she can then go to her line manager and say, this isn't working for me. This is where my anxiety absolutely ramps. So for example, from a personal setting, through logging my data, I know 16th, 17th and 18th of the month, my anxiety is really going to creep up, and then my hormones are going to drop off a cliff. And then a few days later, I'm going to have a very heavy day one of the period. So I work quite smart around that. You know, for example, on day one of a period, I won't go into a corporate setting because I just don't feel comfortable and safe that something, you know, embarrassing is not going to happen. But also my anxiety levels, mapping how that, you know, my husband then knows what's going on with that. But equally, the point I'm saying is, you know, if women are logging this and are prepared to share some of that data with line managers, you know, adopt that sort of sporting marginal gains mindset, which is, right, we've got data here, we're going to work smart with this. And if COVID hasn't taught us anything, you know, it's that we can be very resourceful, we can work smarter, and we can hold women in jobs for a lot longer while their treatment is getting sorted over here. So there's lots, and it's about starting that conversation. And look, I could talk about this for ages, but I just, final point on this. And if you are, you know, a male manager or a male colleague or a male ally that's listening to this, you know, it's leaning into that conversation. And often, you know, if you're a strong character or a strong leader in your organization, you know, you talking up about it will encourage others that is a safe space to enter into. And actually, if we have male allies along the way with us, talking about it, accepting they can't fix it, and being really open-minded to the resources that they can apply here to boost retention, performance and productivity, it's got to be worth a go to stop women leaving the workplace at the rate they are. Yeah,
completely. And so what specific tools can be employed by an employer, then by a line manager, to make it as positive an experience as possible for someone going through that?
So look, I think it starts at the very beginning. It's about how you have that conversation, right? So this is sort of leaning into how I coach good conversations around this. And you know, parking, if you're a woman having that conversation for the first time for a moment, but if you're a manager receiving it, male or female, actually, and I think it's important to say it's not just about male managers.
Yeah, I agree.
Because some female managers may not have experienced it, or they may have gone through it and it wasn't as bad for them. So, you know, it's really about understanding what the topic of that initial conversation is. You know, I urge my clients to sort of put a meeting in and say that it's for a personal matter or a health matter. Therefore, that recipient knows that there's something serious that wants to be discussed here, and it has to be treated with the right confidence and trust and environment, you know, meeting space, time, etc. But if you're a manager that's going into something like that, it's really worthwhile making sure that you know where your menopause policy is. And, you know, maybe hold yourself to account if you're listening to this, you know, and you think, oh, does my organisation have a menopause policy? They might. Go to your people teams and get signposted to it, and just save it as one of your documents, and maybe just refresh your memory about it once or twice a year. because you just don't know when someone's going to come to you. And at least then you can say, look, we have a menopause policy. Are you aware? Within that understanding and with the support of your HR or people teams, how do you show up as a manager in this? What do you do? And so I think it's about, you've got to put in the legwork a little bit here. And it's not good enough now to sort of say, oh, menopause policy, well, I don't know if we've got one of those. You need to know you're a manager. Yeah. So maybe that's one little task to take away from listening to this, and a little challenge to go and understand and read that. But it's also about giving your colleague the right time and space. You know, I touched on that. You know, often in a corporate setting, you've got these sort of sterile glass boxes. You know, this is a very emotional subject for women, and a lot of women that I work with are just so fearful that they're going to break down and don't feel safe breaking down in that environment, because it's quite exposing, isn't it? So it's about sort of saying, right, okay, we need somewhere fairly private. I'm not going to dash off to my next meeting as soon as this one finishes. I'm going to sort of create a little bit of space before and after so that that conversation can flow. You know, and think about how you create an ongoing trust and safe space for that person, because if you can start laying the foundations from that initial conversation, you're more likely to get that person to really confide in you and to update you and to collaborate with you, I think is the really important word here. And it's also about being mindful that everyone's experience is different. We know this isn't a one size fits all. So if you're a line manager who has had experience of perimenopause or menopause, don't presume that you've nailed it, because this could present different challenges. So have that open mind. And are you clear what your direct report is asking of you? It may be that they literally just want to get this off their chest because it's bothering them. They're worried about what people might be saying or thinking about their performance. This is fueled a lot by imposter syndrome and anxiety, really fueling that at this time. So, you know, what are they asking? Are they asking for some certain measures to be put in place? Are they asking maybe to work a little bit more flexibly or just tweak their hours slightly? Break times, for example, access to outdoor space and fresh air. You know, there's nothing worse than being in a really, you know, busy environment when you're going through a hot flush. So what is it that they're asking, and reaffirm that in that meeting as well. Don't just walk away thinking, I don't know what I'm meant to be doing here. You know, just ask questions. It's absolutely fine, and seek permission to ask questions in order to fuel your own understanding and knowledge of what's being asked here. And I think, you know, it's that final point of don't promising things that you just can't deliver, because that's just not going to be helpful to that individual, especially if they're really having a torrid time of it. And I think more broadly, there's other things, you know, we've talked about menopause policies, but it's about menopause training. You know, there's some fantastic organizations out there that come into workplaces with HR trainers, and they train people to be menopause champions, for example, much like mental health first aiders. You know, so explore that. That's a really great option to have. You know, how are you using your intranets? Have you got a menopause hub? Is there something really helpful here that you can have a central hub where managers as well as individuals can access evidence-backed information, your menopause policy, any health insurance documents assigned to your organization, etc. There's networks. There's just so many things that you can be doing. But you know, I would really challenge people to think, if you're doing something, that's great, but what's the stretch here? How can you push a little bit further and do that little bit more? And it doesn't need to be budget busting. It really doesn't. You know, forming of networks, buying up really useful evidence-backed information, books that you can make accessible in a communal area, for example. You know, there's lots of things you can think quite creatively, but importantly, involve women who are going through this or who have gone through it to be part of this solution focus, because, you know, they'll have some really great ideas of, oh, I wish I had this when I was going through it. And ask any woman going through it, they'll all reflect on something that they wish they knew. And there could be something really powerful within that sharing and that collaboration that can impact things positively for next women going through it in your organization. So it's about sort of saying, do I know enough about this? And if I don't, what am I going to do to go and educate myself about it?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. And we'll talk about networks and support groups and that sort of thing in a second. But if you are feeling anxious about having that conversation with your line manager, how would you go about prepping for that particular meeting. We've touched on it, but obviously from a personal level, it could be a time where you're feeling very, very vulnerable, as you say, and quite anxious and not wishing to get upset. So how would you what's the best way of preparing for that first conversation?
I think, in order to paint a picture as to why women feel like that, and any woman who may be listening that is feeling like that, absolutely be assured that you're not alone. There's a lot of taboo and stigma associated with this. And we talked about up to 44%, worried about embarrassment. And that sort of goes off into things around, your personal brand, your future prospects, your development. Are you going to get written off? Is there going to be a loss of confidence or faith in you? Are you going to have work taken off of you without your approval for things like that? So there's a lot of fear around it. There's also this confusion around education. A lot of people don't know enough about it, so aren't taking the right steps, from an informed perspective. And there's fear, isn't there, of speaking up about something that even women don't fully understand what's going on with them. There's this thing of, feeling like you're going slightly mad, and actually articulating that might sound like you are really genuinely going mad in your own head, and actually having to confide that in someone else is a tough territory to navigate. And I think there was some data, and I'm trying to think of the source of this, but something like over 40% said that they felt that it was being treated as a bit of a joke in the workplace, which is often the way, isn't it? Immaturity takes over when people don't have any education about something. So, there is a really good reason as to why women feel that this is just a really awkward subject. And that this is one of the things that I encounter a lot in my world when I talk to women or groups of women and sort of say, look, should we begin exploring how we have that conversation? No, absolutely not. Get shut down. There is absolutely no way. I mean, one woman once said to me, when we were at an event talking, I think I'd gone along and watched a panel event talking about it. And she said, God, I'd rather quit than tell my boss about this. And that's just so sad. And I actually think there is a huge percentage, particularly of male managers, that will be really quite heartbroken to hear that. So what can women do? So much like we were talking about, managers prepping for that conversation, women need to prep for that conversation too. You need to take notes. You need to write down exactly what is it that you want to disclose. You don't have to tell them anything, really. It's your health, it's personal. But what do you need to disclose in order to get what you need? And what is that? What does that look like? What are you looking for? What, if this is your reality, what's your action? And what do you need from that? So take notes in, and this is coming from a meticulous note taker, which won't surprise you as a journalist, but it holds you to account and it keeps you focused on what you're looking for. And when the conversation may deviate off different ways, it's really helpful to have that anchor by way of notes. And look, I'm a big advocate for taking someone in. You might have a colleague who's an ally, or someone that you just sort of think, oh, I just want a wing person in there with me, just to make sure I'm hearing everything correctly and that I'm getting what I need from this. So that's another option to explore if that makes you feel safe. And it's about, at the very first instance, saying this is a personal matter. So that person receiving that information needs to own that and needs to act accordingly to that. If you're anxious, and it's a real coaching tool, which I'm sure is something that you use in your day-to-day life, but role playing it, just simply talking to the mirror, saying it out loud while you're making a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, say it to a friend, say it to your coach, say it to a mentor. And that process of hearing your words out loud, out of your head, can have quite a calming effect. And you sort of think, no, I know what I need to get here. And reaffirm that at the end, sort of saying that just to take you through the actions, this is what I'm asking for. And you're going to either take that away, or this is how we're dividing up the rule. Because look, you know what it's like, we all have endless meetings, don't we, on Teams, and you come away scratching your head thinking, what's the point of that? That's a complete waste of time. So, strategize the meeting. This is your meeting, you take ownership of it, and really explore and get what you need from that. And, that might be somewhere where you want to introduce some of your data and what it's telling you about how you think, 16th, 17th, this is pretty rubbish. But then I know that this pocket of time in my monthly cycle, I'm really on it. So I just want to be in the office the whole time then. Just going to need a little bit of support here, but I'm absolutely still working. I'm just doing it in a safe environment that is making me work smarter and perform better. So think through maybe how you might want to start disclosing some data and maybe some solutions or things that's telling you that you can try. And I think, you know, it's about staying focused on your goal, isn't it? And this, I'm guessing I'm preaching to the converted here with coaching, that, you know, what is your goal, and how are you going to hold yourself account to get there? And that's going to take a lot of confidence and a lot of will to get yourself over the line. But considering those points that I've taken through around how you prep for it, how you rehearse it, how you set that up and take ownership of it, and what you need, you know, be a little bit selfish. What do you need? And you know, I think sometimes if you're then explaining to the business why they're going to be better for it, that's no bad thing either to articulate.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. There might be people listening to this that think, well, that's great corporate environment or in an office-based environment, but you've got more of an insight into policing, haven't you? So it might be a good time to talk about that. And because what I'd like to cover as well is it could be a difficult conversation when you're in that 24/7 emergency service type environment. So if you just expand on that for us a little bit, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think that the sort of layers of complication around that, and actually I've been researching this myself. There's actually a brilliant lady called Natalie Beresford who she's actually an award-winning menopause champion. She's a retired detective inspector from Thames Valley Police. So anyone listening to this should go check her out, because she really transformed the conversation within her force around menopause when she started experiencing it and the impact that it had. For example, the stab vests, the weight of that, and sorry, I'm not within blue light, but I think Natalie said that it can weigh anything up to a stone once you've got all the kit attached to it. You know, when you're and I think, and I may stand corrected, so please correct me if I'm wrong here, but you know, stab vests aren't designed for women with larger breasts, for example, you know, so that's quite a limiting thing. You've got all this weight on you, you're wearing clothing that probably isn't great when you have a massive hot flush. So it's about sort of understanding what your reality is. You haven't slept, but you're expected to go out on blue lights at goodness knows how many miles per hour. And actually what Natalie said was, just got to talk about it. So she went straight to the top and said, this is what is happening to me every single day. I'm not alone. We need to do something about this. So it's about engaging your networks. So I know within the police, you have brilliant array of networks that tap into all walks of community and life. And it's about saying to them, can you get on board with this conversation, with this narrative? This is going to impact however many of our people. You know, you're going to have over 50% of the population going through it. You look at how many blue light females there are, that's a large, significant number of people. And it's really about how you're having those conversations with each other. You know, if you're double crewed on something, you know, it's about having someone when you sort of say, look, when I'm doing this briefing, I'm potentially going to forget this, or I'm going to need to default to you on this because brain fog's really tripping me up today. And it's about normalizing those conversations and putting tools in place that you sort of own and think, that's not me not doing my job well. Quite the opposite. That's me being a really efficient operator because I've identified where I'm slightly weaker here and I'm delegating to my team because that's what teamwork is all about. And it's about treating this with maturity and respect. And, you know, the wisdom that comes at this time of life for a woman, you know, we've all been working for decades at that point, you know, and just respecting that and thinking, right, this is what she's asking of me. You know, next week I might need something from her. And I think it's about having that conversation. It's about making sure that it's constantly on the table, that it's being signposted to. Everyone can find it either on the intranet or wherever they need information. And that normalization of talking about it becomes second nature to people. And even when you're entering at the very beginning of your blue light career, it's being talked about even then.
It really worries me actually that, you know, some of those having to actually, so I love the fact that you've got to normalize it. That is exactly the right thing to do in education. That's absolutely the right thing to do. What worries me and what I hear quite regularly is that some of this is almost seen as incompetence or, you know, you're not on your game as much as you were. And you sort of mean, and it's really difficult. So I think you have to normalize it and educate And you know, I love the fact if you know, if you've got the courage to say to a colleague, right, I'm struggling here, you're going to need to help, and that's exactly the right path to go down. But you know, I'm certain that there'll be people out there thinking, you know, I'm being seen as incompetent, but actually it's way out of my control. And that, you know, it's how to get over that. And I think it has to be normalizing it, and it has to be that education piece.
Yeah, and it has to be from the top. It has
Completely.
to be particularly male leaders, but also female leaders at the top saying, this is important. We can't afford to lose this talent and this experience.
Yeah.
And we're going to have really mature, open conversations about it. And actually, I want to just pick up on two things really briefly that you said there, Andy, about courage. It takes a lot of courage. And actually, you know, if you're not ready to talk about this, then don't do it. You know, you've got to own this. This is your story. This is your journey. But I have read, you know, of stories where women have been put on disciplinaries because they've been pulled up about, oh, you haven't met this deadline, or you've forgotten this key action because of brain fog. And, you know, bearing in mind that a lot of women might not know what's actually going on with them, or might be going through the absolute total hell of trying to get treated, and even if you are on sort of medication or any sort of solution, that sometimes takes a little bit of time to juggle out and level out and get that right. And then, you know, and I have heard of, or read online, there's an article about it of a woman who was pulled up by her line manager, and then when she said, look, I think this is about the time to disclose that I'm actually going through perimenopause, I'm seeking treatment for it, it's become a really debilitating time in my life, and this is all just playing into my symptoms, to then be told, no, that's an excuse, your performance isn't good enough. You know, it's about, we've got to see that off the path, and that all comes from top down, saying enough. We're going to have really honest, normal conversations about this. If you want to share, if you want to be courageous, please do. You don't have to, because we're going to have your back here, because there is enough evidence out there now in the world to say we all have to do something about this in the workplace. Yeah,
I really hope at the very least, you know, if women listening to this are thinking, oh my God, you know, this is exactly what I'm going through, I really hope it helps at least to obviously, you know, you're there, and the likes of Natalie as well, and others are there.
Exactly.
But just,
and reach out and have that reassurance.
Absolutely.
We can all just be mad together. You don't need to do it on your own.
From a self-help perspective, I'm going to talk about allies in a second, but from a self-help perspective, what sort of things can you put in place to just, you know, make it as stress-free and as, you know, put everything in the right place, basically, to get through it?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. There's this really great PT called Ali Atkins who really focuses on women's health and well-being over 40. And she has sort of this phrase, which is HRT won't fix a crappy lifestyle. So I think when you ask what women can do, and this is a constant learning piece for me as well, by the way, this isn't me saying try this, try that, and everything will be great. You know, I'm still in the thick of all this. But it's about nutrition. You know, you've got to be thinking about what you're putting in your body in the morning, at lunchtime, and at night. Really sets you up for the next day. So it's all about, and I've done a lot of learning around protein. You know, I was a toast and jam person in the morning, and maybe a glass of apple or orange juice. And I've realized now that that's just messing with my glucose throughout the day. Like, I'd crash just as the kids were coming home from school, and then I'd get up a bit, eat some more food, and then I'd be wide awake at 3 in the morning. And I'm thinking, I'm literally on this like yo-yo. It's like a roller coaster throughout the day. And so I stripped that back and realized, you know, I'm not actually fueling my body and fueling my hormones in the right way. So I'd really urge everyone to go away and consider, what are you eating? You know, things like a really good solid breakfast of, you know, natural yogurt, seeds, nuts, no honey, no syrup, you know, some berries, things like that is a really good start. And that's something you can pack up, shove in the bag and take with you. You know, if you do have a canteen and you've got the ability to access it, something like some eggs, you know, avocado, stuff like that is really good to just, you know, fuel your hormones with really good protein and good fats. And then that sort of sets you up for the day. Exercise, you know, and I bet everyone listening will say the same as me. Oh, I've got time for exercise. How do I fit it in? And look, you know, that's where you've got to hold yourself accountable. That's the fun stuff around coaching, is like, right, what can you do here to do that? And you know, is it a case of getting up 5-10 minutes earlier? You know, can you just do a quick walk around the block? You know, you don't have to do a spin class, you don't have to do this, that, and the other. You can make it easily accessible for you. But, you know, getting moving. And I think muscle is really, really important after 40 to prevent injury. How much water are you drinking? Hydration is really key. And I suspect that certainly in certain blue light jobs, it's really easy to forget that. And not also very practical if you need to go to the toilet. So, but it's about how are you hydrating yourself really effectively. Your relationship with alcohol, I think, is really important as well. I think a lot of women, and myself included, it's that alcohol anxiety really ramps up, and actually a glass of wine doesn't harm, but I think, you know, it's that how much you're drinking. And I've pretty much cut it all out, and I'm a lot steadier and a lot happier, and I feel a little bit more joy consistently in things. And it's about taking those tough steps. You know, your life is changing, but I think also, you know, it's for the better as well. You're kind of into this second part of your life, and it's really embrace it with, you know, all that amazing learning that you've done in your teens, your 20s, your 30s, your 40s. And then you get to this point where you just think, right, I can be me now. I can do the things that serve me well. And it's, you know, well-being is just so important to all of this. And it will go some way if you are or are not on HRT. It will go some way to propping up the treatment that you are on. But, you know, it's things like, and I hate this term, I don't know why I'm going to say it, but it's that whole having good sleep hygiene. I don't know why they call it hygiene. It really, I don't know, it just annoys me. But like what's your sleep routine? You know, are you reading a book, or are you just sat in front of a tablet, phone? I'm guilty of that, you know, that endless scrolling. We all do it, don't we? And but what impact is that having on steadying our brain and our minds and calming ourselves for a really good sleep? And, you know, it might feel like a lot to do, but if you sort of arrange health, fitness, nutrition, well-being, hydration into manageable nuggets, you know, don't go from 1 to 10. You're at 1, great. How am I going to get to 2? What do I need to do here? And how am I going to get to 3? So it's really about taking ownership, because at this time you feel completely powerless, that your body's taking you over and it's utterly rubbish and miserable. But there are things that you can do, and there's some incredible resources on social media, online. Just check that you're confident that they're evidence-backed and they're from trusted sources, but there's some really great stuff out there.
Are there any that you call out in terms of being well worth following?
Yeah, so there's a book actually that I'm into at the moment, which is The Glucose Goddess. She's a French microchemist, I think, and this is all about understanding what your glucose level do during the day based on how you're fueling it. And this is where I learned toast and jam is just probably one of the worst things for me to eat in the morning, not for everyone. And it's just about the why, you know, rather than someone saying to you, eat eggs in the morning, it's the why, and it sort of gives you that layer there. And also her book just has some really good recipes, because it's that COVID hangover, isn't it? Like coming up with things to cook, and that's interesting and palatable can get a little bit laborious. So, you know, it's a recipe book as well as almost an essay of her research and her studying in this space. So she's really good. Ali Atkins, PT on Instagram, she does some really great exercises. And she has an app that you can, you know, it's all about that strength training and looking after your muscles and your joints at the, you know, over the age of 40. There's also, you know, other resources of things like charities, you know, so if you're looking for evidence-backed and trusted resource, you've got British Menopause Society, which is the bms.org.uk. There's Menopause Support, which is a fantastic charity that I just love. It's all about raising awareness and educating and community, and that's just menopausesupport.co.uk. Again, both of those websites will have an array of the symptoms. You know, I've just touched on a handful, but if you head to those resources, they'll be able to really expand on some of that for you, with tips and hints and things of how to make life that little bit easier.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks, Anna. And you also mentioned, was it Genis, did you say? The
And
app as well?
Genis, yeah, of course,
Yeah.
Genis. So if you're curious around this cycle mapping thing, you know, you can cycle map for any point of your life cycle, really. So Genis, it's on an app, it's really easy, it's full of really great experts. I'm their exec coach on there, but there's nutritionists, there's someone on there for breath work, which is really linked to help hot flushes and anxiety. There's yoga. There's just a hub of information. And the really interesting thing about Genis is that you log your symptoms and then they send you itemized, personalized tips and things that you can do. So it's not a blanket, oh, there you go, you've got a hot flush, this is what you need to do. It's designed a little bit more sophisticated than others to kind of say, right, you know, this is an intervention here. Have you tried this? And then they can signpost you to the breathwork tools and things like that. So absolutely be logging your symptoms and head to Genis to figure out how you can do that.
Fantastic. Thanks, Anna. And then, you know, on a personal level, what can I do to help my partner?
Listen, just listen. And you know, it's a tough place for blokes to be, I have to say, when another half is going through this. And you know, you need to educate yourself as much as everyone does. You know, your partner will be educating herself and reading lots of different resources and information and trying to understand and make sense of all of this. And actually, there are things that you can do also. You know, there's a really good book published by Penguin Life Experts, got a bright pink cover on it. You could read it in a couple of days, and it's by Dr. Louise Newson, and it's basically an introduction to perimenopause and menopause. And it sort of talks you through. It has great tools in there for women who are having that conversation with their GP and how to go about that, for example. But you know, reading something like that will almost bring you up on a bit of a level. But it's about communication. It's so important. You know, that's a massive tool in relationships anyway, isn't it? Communication. But it's about what they need from you, and you know, really being honest with each other about it, and showing up and sort of saying, look, I can come to that GP appointment with you, would you like me to be there? You know, what can I do to make things a bit better? You know, things like sleep at night time. A lot of women that I work with feel awful that they're just disrupting their other half's sleep. So is there a solution you can get to together? You know, I read this thing online the other day about apparently it's some really popular thing in Spain where you both have your own duvet. And I was thinking, that's genius, because then you don't have anyone tugging the duvet, you can have a different top. Like, why have we not done that? Why are we not doing that already? So spread the word about that. You know, it's just little things like this, you know, how is it impacting? And, you know, I think also it is a time where divorce rates go up, right? It is, it's a fact. And, you know, and it's no wonder, you know, none of us know what's going on, you know, to the point about education in schools. You know, guys they're not educated about what testosterone is doing in their bodies from their 40s, 50s, 60s, you know. So it's about just being really honest and just really listening to what that person might need. But also within that, Andy, is really important self-care for you as an individual, because, you know, I've had a go at my husband about milk and just really ridiculous things and blown off the handle about it. And that's hurtful, you know, that's just not nice, is it? But it's about sort of normalizing that conversation and, you know, have a bit of a laugh about it as well, where you can. I think that's really important.
Yeah. I think it's us recognizing as well, isn't it, that it's not just having a pop. There is something behind it, you know. It's just recognizing that actually there might be something going on that is fueling this behavior, you know.
Exactly. A lot of partners just want their old partner back, like, well, where's the old Anna gone, you know? But it's about accepting this is a different phase of my life. I've just got to figure it out for a bit. And it's see it as a new chapter and try and reframe it a little bit like that, which is hard when you're absolutely desperate and feeling awful, I understand. But you know, it's better to go on that path with a partner who's with you. Might not get it, but they're with you and they want you to feel better. It's a much nicer place to be and less isolating.
I guess, I mean, obviously I'm no expert, but I think, are you finding that when this phase is done, and you're into the next phase with confidence that it's an opportunity to thrive and, do all the things that you love to do. That and maybe do more, like you said earlier, you find yourself again, it's that sort of.
Yeah, I do. I really do believe that. And I think, I'm 42 almost now. So I've been going through perimenopause for about 4 years now, probably a little, just a bit under. But I read really inspiring women who are post-menopause,
Absolutely.
and, you've got all that wisdom. And this is the thing that I sort of say about the workplace. We need more women over the age of 50 in the workplace, because, businesses, we know that businesses that have women on boards, they do better, they make more money. All of this is just logical. And it's a case of, if we keep women in their jobs now, then we're going to benefit in the long run by all this wisdom, experience, knowledge, reflection, and kind of can-do attitude. That's the vibe I'm getting from some of these women that I follow, that are just really, they're embracing a lease of life. They wear what they want, they go where they want, they're, really successful in their jobs. And there's no BS attached to it. They just get on because they're just so decisive, and they've just brought all of that life journey with them. And I just think we all need to aspire to that. Men as well, actually.
Oh, completely. Yeah.
We all can thrive in our careers, at whatever age that we want.
Yeah. And life is not all about careers, is it? It's doing all those things that for a period of time you may not feel that you can do, but actually you get to a point where you go, right, now this is it, let's just crack on. I love that. Absolutely love it. Fascinating. We could talk for ages on this. It's so, honestly, thank you so much, Anna, for your time. It's been incredible. It really has. And I really hope from this, even if one person listens to it and just says, wow, I now know what I'm going through and this is what I'm going to do about it, it'll just make such a difference. It really will. So and I think that's the key takeaway. If you think you might be going through this, or you are, you will often feel like you're just going around on a conveyor belt. You need to just break that cycle. And that really starts with you being able to do that, and what that looks like in that moment for you. But it is absolutely possible. And there are some really great people and community out there that can support. So I really hope that someone feels empowered enough to just sort of take ownership back a little bit now at this time of their life. Yeah, amazing. Thanks, Anna. What's the best way to connect with you? How can people find you? So you can find my website. So that's www.allertoncoaching.com, or it's at Allerton Coaching on Instagram, and find me under Anna Allerton on LinkedIn. Brilliant. Thanks. Now, could you spell Allerton for us, just to make sure? Yeah, sure. It's Allerton. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Amazing. Absolutely. Pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's great talking with you. I really hope you enjoyed the conversation with Anna. Hugely insightful and just a real joy. And I just found it so educational. So if you do need to reach out, then please contact Anna through allertoncoaching.com, and she'll help you in whatever way she can. So don't forget, you can leave a review on Apple and Spotify, and that really helps to get the message out that this podcast exists. And if you need any help support, you can reach out to andy@bluelightlevers.com, or you can visit the website bluelightlevers.com, and there's tons of free information there as well. So go to the resources section, there's loads of stuff there. So again, as always, just huge thanks from me for listening. It means a huge amount. And without you, it'd be pretty pointless, really. So thank you from me. Right, we'll catch up next time. And we've got a couple of weeks break now before the next one over the summer. And we'll catch up again soon. Take care. Bye for now.